Let's come back home to the biggest story. Nigeria's central bank retaining its key lending rate at 27.5%, the first time since May 2022, even as the financial regulator is looking at a single-digit inflation environment. And there is more to dissect from the MPC communique that was read a few hours ago by the central bank chief, Olayemi Cardoso. Welcome my guests in our Abuja studios, Steve Osho, a co-managing partner at Commercial Partners. Great having you tonight on the show. Central bank decision to hold all parameters unchanged. Good to see you in the new year.
Mr. Boasin, how are you? Good evening.
It's good to see you. Thank you very much for coming through. Give me your first word on the rate hold decision.
I think it's expected. That will be my first word today.
That's, as far as the expectation is concerned, it's in line with your expectations as a market professional.
Of course, yes. I think if I will point attention even to some of the reports we just released from Commercial Partners for macroeconomic reports for 2025, the outlook actually suggested that we're expecting, at least from the first MPC meeting, there will be a hold. And all the numbers released from the inflation numbers actually in line with what our expectation was when we actually released our report. So everything that's come out from the report we had, coming from the inflation numbers, coming from the result of the MPC, is in line with our expectation. So that's why I said it was expected.
So what does the whole decision mean within the context of the current economic indices, such as inflation, the PMI, GDP for third quarter, what the rebasing will most likely look like, and exchange rate? I read your 150-page report. That was very quite robust, not just on the local macro environment, but also on the global. You also took a whole lot as far as Pan-African is concerned, taking a look at a few African economies, Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt, Kenya, and a few others. So within the context of our current economic indices, how do you situate, contextualize today's decision to hold?
I think, first off, we need to say kudos to the current MPC committee members and to the central bank governor under the leadership of Yemi Cardoso. I think for the first time in a long while, we're beginning to see central bank of Nigeria that is actually driven in terms of professionalism. And we're saying that there's a reason why they actually moved the meeting from when it was supposed to happen in January till this month. And that's on the back of the fact that they were expecting some data to come out, and they actually knew that the possibility is there that the data will probably, determine the outcome of what the MPC committee meeting would decide at the end of the day when the communique is released. And on the back of that, I think it signaled the fact that the present MPC committee are going to rely so much on data. And I think it was mentioned during the course of the interview, during the session of the meeting today, when the governor was answering the journalist. So the committee are relying so much on data, and knowing fully well what happened between the rebase number that actually been released by MBS on the new inflation number, and coming on the back of the fact that even the GDP number is going to be rebased. So there's going to be a lot of moving factor that will probably determine or affect the decision that's going to be taken at that window. So it's very important. But if you look at the context of this particular meeting and the reason why it's actually put on hold, we've seen inflation number based on the MBS report that was just released drop from the high of 34.8 to about 24.48 in the number that was released. That is actually very massive. And the reason is because of the new recalibration that was done to the inflation number. And that said, I think a lot of other moving factors would happen going forward, because there are a lot of data points that you actually need to look at. And considering the fact that last year, 2024, we witnessed quite a lot of movement in terms of inflation from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, tanking around about 34.8 during the course of that year. I think going forward with the high rebase effect that was seen in 2024 December number, which has actually now, reacted or realigned the inflation number to the present figure that we're seeing, we'll begin to see much of moderation in terms of that inflation rate, and that will go a long way in determining what decision that will be taken by the Central Bank of Nigeria and the MPC committee. And if you look at it in terms of what does that mean for the economy, I think there are a lot of data that they will still have to look at. There are a lot of data points they have to look at before they take further decision. But in my view, I think it's actually good for the economy because we've seen interest rates trade as high as 30%, 28%. We've seen government bonds borrow money in the market at a high of level of 22.6%. And we've seen yield on treasury bills as high as 29% or 30% in the previous month. So I think now we're going to be seeing a lot of moderation, and that has actually signaled the effect of what we saw at the last auction, which was just released, I think, yesterday, yes, where we see the one-year paper actually printed around 18 levels. So I think generally it's good for the economy, and as the interest rate begin to go lower, we'll probably begin to see a lot of urgent credit go into the real sector at the same time, not at those harmful rates of 30% and above 30% we've seen for the past few months.
So Steve, technically speaking, if you look at the last few auctions by the NTB, it looks like the central bank was signaling that somehow it's going to take his feet off the gas pedal, as it were, as far as interest rate was concerned. So rate begins to moderate at the weekly NTB auctions. Now we're doing 1 year at about 18 at the official window, as we saw. So you weren't surprised that now investors are piling to the FMDQ, for example. Between the last 3-4 days, we've done more than 1 trillion naira. The FMDQ in terms of everyone going to the secondary market to look for. So the market is pricing in the likelihood that the central bank will hold interest rates. So how should investors, and that's my next question, how should investors price in this rate and what the outlook will be moving down the line in the near to medium term? Steve.
I think for a lot of investors, they actually been looking at this movement for some time, and they were certain filter effect people are actually looking towards and see how that will pan out into the market. And I think on top of that was, I think one that's the most critical was the fact that you've seen the currency appreciate in the interbank market and in the parallel market as well. That movement has indicated that there is some level of stability and confidence that has been instilled in that market. And with that happening, we've seen a lot of interest coming from the FPIs, that's foreign portfolio investors, who are coming to the space. And considering the fact we've seen high yields on Nigerian treasury bills and bonds, is indicated that there is a possibility of positive carry trade from offshore investors. And at the same time, we have some local investors who are looking at it that we have actually not seen this kind of movement or this kind of high interest rate in 3 decades, actually. So I think that signals some level of interest from investors. Right. And considering the fact we actually see a lot of other flows coming through from the offshore investors as well, has galvanized that market. And I think going forward, we're going to see a lot of investment into government treasury bills and bonds. By next week, I think there's going to be another almost about 150 or 200 billion on offer for bond, and alongside with some of the other reissuance that will come from the OMO and treasury bills. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity in that market. We're going to continue to see a lot of investment and a lot of interest in that space for the rest of the year. Yeah, and considering the fact that we're actually seeing the first MPC during the course of the year, and we're seeing the central bank actually hold the rate at this point, it actually signals that probably we have actually got to the end of the hike or hawkish stance from the Monetary Policy Authority. Okay. And going forward, probably, if we don't see a dovish stance, we'll probably see a reaction that will indicate that the government or the central bank will probably indicate more of dovish stance going forward.
You're speaking to some of the things you talked about there. The Naira gained 1% today. It's now traded 1,494 at NAFEX today. That's a very, the market also reacting to what we're seeing as far as the central bank. But just to summarize this conversation with you, what are your thoughts around the new MPC calendar that's cut down the number of meetings? The central bank is now saying the next MPC meeting will be around the 19th and 20th of May. That gives us about 2 months, there about 3 months lag. What's the central bank trying to achieve?
Well, I don't know the reason why they're actually trying to cut down the number of times they meet during the year. I think from the calendar, they normally meet around 6 or 8 times in the course of the year, which is maybe like once every 6 weeks, thereabout. But again, if you look at what they're trying to do, if they're saying they're going to be data-driven, which means that they're going to rely so much on a lot of data and a lot of moving parts in the market. We don't have the rebase number for the GDP now. We only have for the inflation numbers. So I think a lot of other things will actually happen during the course of the year. And probably they want, the data to filter the, whatever effect or whatever decision that they've made. And that will see how that will pan into the next meeting. And that will probably give them enough room and enough data to be able to analyze and come up with the right decision going forward.
Yeah, yes, I guess so. Just reducing the number of meetings to 5. We've seen a few other, one or two other African countries are also adjusting their monetary policy meeting timetable, cutting it down to about 5 as well, just to allow. But again, we need to watch a whole lot of things, as your report actually pointed out, to watch the U.S. very closely, as the Fed is also beginning to take a step back as far as the rate cut for this year is concerned. So a lot to watch there. Thank you, Steve Osho, for watching for us tonight. It was a pleasure having your professional insight into the macro and development. Steve Osho, co-managing partner at Commercial Partners. Have a wonderful evening.